Hi everyone, weekly for code review. The first one I have here is just I wanted to have a brief discussion, and this is very loose, but I feel like there's multiple threads of interest in this topic, and I wanted to kind of like, since we're preparing for a string of less available from Yukai, I wanted just to like get everybody on the same page. So there seems to be a consensual struggle with the current to-dos, not just within code review, but within GitLab as a whole. And I wanted to check if we have any particular plans taking shape that we can prepare for, or if we can start talking about cosmetic updates, like just like we did for the beautifying UI, just kind of tweaking the current to-dos into shape, or if we are preparing for a major overhaul. So yeah, that was kind of my question. What are the threads that are currently ongoing, and is there anything that we can do to prepare to help in this regard? I know that they're not within our code review team; they're kind of like stale or sitting down, not being prioritized in other groups. But yeah, any thoughts there?
It's a good question. I have a meeting right after this about to-dos.
Oh, good.
I think Annabelle has an open issue about to-dos as well, sort of, kind of. Here's what I mean, maybe this is the best way to say this. There is nothing concrete that we're thinking about. I think what we do need to do is put together probably like some ideas that we've got and things that we think we can do that aren't so big that we need to go talk to Gabe and Plan and
The whole company,
integrations and all these other people, the whole company, and sort of what are the things we can do. And we haven't done that. We sort of we started having all these conversations during attention request pieces, and we came out of attention requests sort of saying, we think we want to do something small here, but we don't have anything concrete, and we haven't put any issues or proposals together. So I would say there's nothing super concrete. Yeah, and Annabelle linked her issue. So I think we need to spend some time in design and research, maybe. But this is probably a good question for Annabelle.
If you look at the proposal, it's not even, I didn't create an issue because there are already, I don't know, 100 issues about to-dos. So I just posted something in Slack on Friday, mostly because I couldn't figure out where to put the added to-do button. So it snowballed into, can we just try anything? And I just think that the first, not simple, because we don't store notifications right now in the database, but the most obvious step to get to like a complete notification experience would be to store them in the database and show them with the to-dos. So every email notification that you get, you can see it in the current to-dos area. So my proposal is to do that, rename it notifications, remove the word to-do from the entire product, and basically change it into notifications. And then it would be like a really basic experience where if you're looking at notifications, so-and-so mentioned you click on it. When you go to that issue or whatever it is, there's a button that's like seen. So kind of like the mark as done right now. To do as a concept is really useful, but ours are not to-dos. So then I opened this other issue for a dashboard where maybe you can create a proper to-do list where you can, create a list, link it to issues, and it doesn't show up in the activity in the way that it does now. It's just your personal to-do list. And maybe on every page there's, like add a to-do from the ellipsis icon and everything like that. But anyway, I think that we need to rename it notifications, remove to-dos, put it behind a feature flag, and see what happens. And
I'll say, adding on to that, because I mentioned I have a meeting. My meeting after this is with Grant to talk about Slack notifications, which is another huge piece of this that like we probably need to be very cognizant of, which is why this gets very messy very quickly. and I will say my very first question to Grant is, why do people use the Slack integration? Is it because our notifications are so bad that they want these in Slack? And this is like the fastest way to get better notifications is to have them in Slack? Because I think if the answer to that is sort of like a yes, then like we have like an even bigger problem on our hands of like, even if we fix the notification experience in GitLab, if people have a different notification experience in Slack than they do in GitLab, like that's just sort of problematic across the board. So, yeah, I think that just points to there's a lot of conversations that we need to have, and I think it's fair to just create proposals or issues, and work with Pedro and Annabelle and figure out like what makes sense to do and what is so big that we don't want to do. The thing that I don't want to inadvertently do is commit us to owning to-dos by accident. So if we make a substantial change, potentially like the one Annabelle is proposing, someone might decide that we now own to-dos and we will get it for life. And need to spend lots of capacity on that and maybe not other things that we think we need to be working on. So we need to be mindful of the GitLab's, as Amy so correctly pointed out, you break it, you bought it thing that happens a lot with big cross-functional things in GitLab.
Yeah, that's
Something about
that's
this one,
totally fair. Go ahead.
If we did manage to do that, just showing notifications in the to-dos area and basically the rough outline of what I proposed, there are so many people who've contributed to this issue and all the other issues. Like Gabe is already aware of this and mildly on board. I think it was hard to kind of gauge. And then Matthew on the design team has done all kinds of stuff on that, and we've been kind of going back and forth on some ideas. So it already feels a little bit more, not global, cross team.
Co-owned.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I don't even know what team Matthew's in, but that's at least 2 different teams. So
it's interesting because we just had an experience about the a very hot, contentious area of co-owned code, which is the widgets. One of the experiences we've had with the report widgets is that it was an example of an area that many groups have a vested interest on, have code that they wrote themselves, and then we were able to get them on board into writing a cohesive code base to follow an architecture that we proposed. That model is working well. I mean, of course, there's always things to be improved, but I think it's working well to the point that we're rolling it out now, and we have identified owners from multiple groups and a way to contribute back to an area that is orchestrated by code review. I don't know if that's a model for to-dos or not, but what I liked there was a full-on UX research effort at the front, identified all of the needs that all the groups had, and came up with a framework that addressed all of those needs. So by the time that we were brought onto the picture, it was implementing that framework with help from those engineers. That model worked remarkably well from my perspective in terms of like, I don't need to, during implementation, go and check what the groups need. So that's definitely adding value to this exploration of UX and up front. So yeah, wanted to share that in case it's meaningful for this particular point. The ownership can be kept where it is right now, but we can have multiple groups contributing to a whole process through the process of a working group. So maybe we don't have to own it if we just participate in a working group as a vested interest to that point. Then we can share the workload and all that stuff, which is something for us to think about in terms of format.
Also, hopefully, like to scope it way down and maybe not do so much upfront design and research, purely because every time that happens, that's a bad example. An example of this actually is a dashboard. I was like, "Ooh, what a great idea." Of course, there are already dozens of issues for a dashboard. And I saw some like fully fleshed out designs. They're amazing that Matei did. And no one's touched it in 8 months. And every time that happens, which is pretty frequent, it's just very frustrating. And I hope that when it comes to something like this, we could just do something in maybe a shorter amount of time. Because I think any improvement is going to be big, and it can't really be cosmetic because there isn't really, I mean, it could look better, but that's not going to change anything. I think it needs to be way more functional than it is.
That's fair. So just so that I can expand on what I meant by cosmetical, it will be something like grouping to-dos of the same item, or expanding some of the drop downs to not be a drop down and be like an easily usable filter button or something. That's the kind of like cosmetic things, not like rewording to-dos into notifications, not reworking notifications as a whole, but more like using the features we have right now, but presenting them a bit better. That's the cosmetic level that I was thinking about, which is, to be honest, we have a staff on our team that would be extremely happy to just jump in and with some guidance, kind of like follow the beautifying efforts example that you and Phil did. You'll be happy to jump in next quarter and improving some of those struggles while the more long-term thing is happening.
Okay.
Just putting that out
Yeah,
there.
I did chat with him a little bit about it. And it did seem like it was something he was interested in, which is fantastic. The additional filtering, the smaller updates that can be made. Sometimes I wonder if that's more like, I keep talking about like MVC in this thread that I linked to, and the filtering based on like, was it a direct mention or was it a group mention, or like, is it a pipeline or is it a review request? Those are things that I think are like need design and research, and that doesn't really fit into just kind of showing everything right now. You know what I mean? I mean, I haven't thought that much more than Friday, so that's not really fair to say. So maybe it does fit in here, and maybe it is like small things that Phil could do.
Yeah, but that's a feature that exists today, right? So in a sense, you wouldn't be changing the feature, you would be changing the way the feature presents. So those small level efforts might still make sense while we take a longer approach to it. So following our iteration value could still make sense. This is just so that you can keep that in mind in case you have a short list like of things that could potentially have a good impact on it. We could take a look at it and just run with it while we have bigger discussions. Just keeping that out there. We don't need to have any specific right now, but do keep those in our realm of visibility so we can take a look at it. Just tag us, basically. Thanks for entertaining the discussion. That was very interesting and insightful. Any more thoughts on that? Okay. So moving on to my second point, I want to be ready for the upcoming weeks where we're going to have to cover for Kai. And I know we're going to have a planning of the milestones, and I know that I'll sync up with Pedro. I know about who, but is there any knowledge that I would like to get on the team's like head, just to be prepared, like anything in specific, or should we just wing it?
That's an interesting question. I thought about this a little. I think you and Pedro Pedro asked about like the ceremonies or the things that we typically do. And I think like we've tried to communicate like what schedule looks like, and what planning looks like. I sort of want to, as much as possible, stay out of it entirely. Like I don't really want to direct the work, which sounds weird. I think, like mergeability, right? Like, the big things, but I'm sort of hoping that I go away, like Pedro did when he was on paternity leave, and he went away, and the beautifying effort came back, and lots of things changed, and it was different and good, and like there was like new feedback and thought into how the process works and what we should do. And so that's why I want to stay distant if I can, and let you and Pedro and Annabelle and Jay, although I don't think Jay will be involved quite yet, but like I sort of want to see like how this goes as an experiment, to know like what are we missing? Like, what are the inputs that we're missing that because you're doing this with different people that we're finding and we're bringing in, right? And there's nothing that we have. Like I can put the major efforts in, like if you want in 15.3 and 15.4, I think like mergeability, and I would have normally consistently set attention requests, but that's not one. So like I'll go look if there's anything outside of mergeability. I think it's the front end pieces we'll have to start incorporating there. That's really the only big thing that we need to make sure we're continuing to drive. And so as long as that is happening, and you know this from planning, we only pick up a very small number of those issues every milestone. And then it becomes sort of, what are the other interesting things we want to work on? Like I sort of want to see what that looks like with other people taking a look at the stuff. So
okay. If I want to say thank you for the trust. But I like where your head's at. We definitely know about the top topics basically, so no much surprise there. But that helps me get into your frame of mind on how we should approach this time. So that's helpful.
Yeah, I would say think about it as 2 milestones where I don't know, you'll get even more say than you normally do in what goes into the backlog, I guess.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And we'll definitely make sure that we follow the whole with great power comes great responsibility kind of thing, Uncle Ben.
I trust the people that are going to be covering. I think yeah, I'm excited. I'm actually genuinely excited to like
see what's happening. See what we can
be a good sport and stay out of it, because I think that was hard on beautifying, and I think Annabelle feels like I did okay, and so I'm trying to like do it again. And so like I just want to stay out of it and see what happens.
Sounds good. I have some ideas. And also speaking to what I mentioned in that issue, by the way, I do plan on taking some time off, but I'm still planning that around your availability, the milestone planning, Matt coming back, all of that stuff is still being factored in. So I'm very flexible.
Cool.
That's it. Amy, you have the next point.
Sorry, typing and talking. So Clayton, who's been here long enough that he's an adult and can do what he needs to do, is going to use some portion of my merge requests to help train up Philip Wells, who just started in Colorado. He is in standard technical writing fashion, begging for things to do and not wanting to wait until the end of his onboarding. So we know what has to happen. We teach him. If you don't get what you need, you can always use roulette. You can always use the docs channel. We'll figure it out. Somebody will pick it up if you use one of those two things. You might see it get routed to a different person. Don't worry about that. We'll just adjust based on who's free. Send them lots of merge requests.
This is recorded, Amy.
I know.
I'll clip this bit and send it to them. It's Amy's fault. Just put it in the DMR. No, we will do that. Thanks, Amy. And Amy and Kai, enjoy your time off. It's very well deserved, and do take the time off to just disconnect if you can.
I got some video games that need me.
Ooh,
super important.
I'll see you on Twitch. Never mind.
All right, Ben, you're up next.
It's to read it only, I guess.
Yeah, but the CMS interviews are wrapping up this week finally, and should have a report for you guys next week.
I might be out of the loop here. What's this about?
Category maturity scorecard for the editor extension.
My brain said content management system, and I was really confused.
Me too.
Oh yeah,
Wait,
you guys didn't know? We're redoing the content management system, the non-existent one that we're just. Sorry.
Say it again, Ben. Category maturity
Scorecard. It's something that you usually, I guess, PM or designers do it. But you guys are really busy, so I picked it up this time. There's an editor extension for VS Code where we sort of integrate a little bit some of the workflows, GitLab workflows there. I'm evaluating it according to a process that is called category maturity scorecard. The interviews are almost done, or sessions, really. It's more like a usability. So yeah, it's mixed reviews so far. So we'll see. Yeah, people like it, but it's not fully featured, right? So it has some of the things that people like and not enough of the things for them to stay only in their editor, which is really what people want, right? So that's the TLDR.
I'm excited. It's like the first major research we've done on VS Code stuff at all, or even that category sort of in general. So like I'm sort of excited to see how it comes back. I'm now incredibly nervous that it sounds not super positive across the board, but we'll see how it goes.
I mean, I think it's what it is you've got enough there that people like, but they are expecting to see parity, right? From like what they can do from the web interface or from the command line. And so that doesn't exist yet. For instance, you can see the suggestions that someone has made to like an MR, but you can't accept them. Right. So that's like frustrating.
Thanks for the recording. I was just asking if this would have an impact in the group's maturity level, and Kai, you have a response.
Yeah, it impacts category maturity. So like we measure maturity is measured on a category basis. And while this is the code review group, code review is a category of the code review group, and editor extension is a category of the code review group. And so it measures maturity there. So like our code review category maturity is lovable. And then the goal with this was to move from like minimal to viable, which requires a certain score and some other sort of loose metrics around adoption and people using it to sort of say that you're moving from minimum to viable. What's interesting is when we set out on this process, we only had the VS Code extension. We now have CLI and starts of working on JetBrains things, and so it's not clear how we're ultimately going to need to distinguish like maturity across each of these. If that'll need to be like separate categories or some average for like a global category, I don't know, but that's a future problem that we'll have to figure out. The goal is to sort of just move this up now based on what we said we would do, nearly a year ago at this point. So thanks, Ben, for taking care of that.
Sure thing. It's also interesting because we're going to basically adopt VS Code as our web IDE. And so a lot of these findings are relevant to that effort as well.
Exciting. Thank you. That definitely paints a better picture. I understand it now. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, there's nothing else on the agenda. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'll see you all next week.
Bye.